Hello, this is Cassidy Hansen, and I do my final presentation for the Historian's Craft class. So I wanted to start off by talking about my topic selection and why I chose to do this topic. So the topic I have chose for our wide view paper is the Navajo's removal from the American West. And the reason I chose this topic is because not only is the Navajo's removal just an important part of American history, especially pertaining to it being in the West, but also in the sense that I feel like in regular history courses we don't brush up enough on the effects on how Native American removal impacted early American U.S. history and the lingering effects it has today. The Navajo tribe was one of the tribes that were mainly sheltered in the West, and instances like you hear about the Trail of Tears that happened in a migration from like the Appalachians and mainly happened in the east of the United States. There were also other diversions of things like the Trail of Tears, such as the Long Walk in 1864, which a mass migration of tribes in the West were ordered by the U.S. to migrate elsewhere. I just wanted to touch base on how I believe it's an unfair and unjust ruling that ever occurred in our history, just as a lot of U.S. history has unfolded that way, but in the sense of how it lingers into effects of what that means for Navajo tribes today, or the Navajo tribe today, and where Native Americans are since then. So yeah, that's the reason I chose my topic, and a little bit about an overview of what this will be. So the first article that I found was General Sherman and the Navajo Treaty. This article helps to analyze what ended the Long Walk alongside like Navajo's return home. It focuses a lot mainly on like misunderstandings between U.S. officials and Navajo people, just because it's something that is the reason I chose this article, or reason I analyzed this article to be part of my paper ultimately, was because I think really analyzing and focusing on critical differences between different groups, and like thus then it would have affected not only the Navajo people but the U.S. treaties that were alongside like U.S. officials, what their perspectives were, what Navajo perspectives were, really encompassing the two different sides of both and how they misunderstood one another, and how conflicts it came about because of that, I think is a really good way to start off my paper, and in an article in finding information from different perspectives from both parties. So that is why I have this article in my paper. The next is a digital collection from New Mexico historical sites, the Bosco Riendo Memorial Digital Collections. This digital collection includes like histories, such as like oral histories, photographs, documents that are related to the Long Walk. I think this encompasses such an important piece of my paper, just because it's not just being able to see and believe, but to be able to put a picture to mind of what is being described, and how you could understand how the Long Walk should be remembered. I think that this is a great way to understand its legacy and importance within my paper speaking about this topic. The next article I have is the report of cost in feeding the Navajo Indians at the Bosco Riendo Reservation. This is a digital collection, again, that consists of historical documents that relate to the Navajo Walk. In these conditions at the Bosco Riendo, it helps provide insight to the experiences that the Navajo tribe experienced, what happened to them during this walk, where did they go, where did they stop, what troubles did they have. These were just literal like consistence of sites that they had to go through in order to get to where they were going. I think just even having something that relates to their process of where they had to migrate to is an important part of my paper that I really wanted to bring in and reflect a bigger impact of from the period of the U.S. government policies at the time. Not only is this like depicting what happened to the Navajo tribe, but also in that sense, like how the U.S. government officials got their point across, and what they were trying to do with that. So I think that that's such a important piece of my paper too, to touch base on. You're still looking at different perspectives, but you're knowing what happened to the Navajo people, but also understanding and thinking like why these things were set in. Not saying that they were correct, of course, but again, you're getting that different perspective from both sides. The next is the treaty with the Navajo, which is an actual treaty that the U.S. and the Navajo had signed together. It outlines like terms and conditions of peace, and minding land boundaries and certain responsibilities that both parties had to partake. I think that this is obviously probably one of the most important pieces within my writing, just because it solidifies so much within what my topic is that, we have these conflicts that are resoluting between these parties, and whether you deem one as right or wrong, there's still an active treaty that shows what they can and cannot do between one another. So how will this affect things? How will this play out? What will be put into place? You're starting to think in perspectives of people, whether you're thinking, or both, really, honestly, if you're thinking as a U.S. official or a simple person part of the Navajo tribe, where you can go, what you can do, and is this just? Is this justly? Is this unjustly? I mean, there's just so many questions you could pertain to that, but in my writing, I think that this is probably if not my most important piece, just because it outlines the specific treaties, where people can go, what people can do, that both parties agreed on. The next is the complication of periodical goodness, I'm so sorry. Literature, American Indian Cluster. These archives help in providing like overview of published documents that relate to the American Indian histories. This is just a little bit broader of a stretch, not just like focusing on the Navajo tribe, but also in the sense that like it's able to provide available records of U.S. government official documents, interacting with Native Americans, and in this sense, it will help better understand like the focus around what the narrative for Native Americans as a whole was at the time. And I think it's also important to I'm mainly focusing on the Navajo tribe, but it's important to encompass a lot of what else was going on at that time, and it may even draw conclusions as to why or what was happening to the Navajo tribe. So that's why I have this piece in there. So those were my articles that I have and why I have them tied into my piece. So I want to touch base a little bit about what I haven't talked about and what I'd like to dive further into, which is I'd like to get to know where a lot of the Navajo tribe's descendants are today, in the sense that, what do these families look like now, and how do they live? What are do they have any personal stories or accounts to share about Native American history today? What does it look like to be Native American? What does it look like to be a descendant of the Navajo tribe today? If there's any personal stories or knowledge about family members, hearing about their ancestors' histories, I'd love to be able to touch base on that. I'd love to be able to dig further into that, because I have a little bit of general knowledge about what it's like, or not what it's like, but just facing the what's like for the Navajo tribe or the Navajo peoples when they did go back. But what are those linger effects of as of today, as of 2026? Because I think that's such an important piece of history, is that it's never ending, honestly, that it's constantly creating effects, and there's so much you can learn about the future from history. And I think this is something that we haven't even really held a candle to yet, and knowing that there are effects. We all understand what happened to Native Americans when colonizers first came here, but the effects that it brings in today, I think, is such a interesting perspective that we don't get to touch base on enough, and it's something I'd like to shed more light on in my paper. So I definitely plan on doing that. But as far as my presentation goes, that is what I have so far, and I can't wait to write the rest of my final paper in order to shed light on more things that I hope to touch base on. So thank you so much.